It's a really unsettling idea when you think about it. How does something like persistent falsehoods about election fraud, how does that shift from just noise on the edges to become this, well, permanent destabilizing thing in American politics?
Yeah, that's really the heart of the challenge, isn't it? And it's exactly what the book we're digging into today tackles, The Big Lie by Jonathan Lemire.
Right.
It's this detailed journalistic look at the pretty aggressive efforts to undermine democratic institutions. It tracks the events leading up to, and including, of course, January 6, 2021.
And because the subject is so critical, I mean, it touches the very stability of our civic life, we firmly believe that some books just have to be challenged, really rigorously.
Absolutely.
So this critique, just so you know, uses a step-by-step critical thinking framework. We map claims to evidence, drawing from Richard Paul and Linda Elder's work.
We also bring in an intellectual framework inspired by Mortimer J. Adler's ideas.
And we use the Golden Rule and even the U.S. Preamble to spot ethical asymmetries, let's call them. Then we wrap up with a logical analysis and try for a balanced conclusion.
And we should mention, for you listening, you're part of a unique two-host AI conversation. This is powered by Google's NotebookLM, which lets us get into a, hopefully, deeper and more dynamic book critique.
Okay, so let's unpack the book's main point. Lemire's thesis is, well, it's pretty direct.
It is.
He argues that Donald Trump's repeated lies, which started way before the 2016 race and then really ramped up after the 2020 loss, have permanently fractured party lines and, crucially, deeply eroded public trust in our basic democratic pillars.
And what makes it compelling, I think, is the sheer volume of evidence he presents. The book doesn't just float opinions, it's packed with documented incidents, loads of media coverage, high-level interviews.
Specific examples. What kind of evidence really lands the point?
Well, think about things like the documented pressure campaigns on federal agencies. Or even going back further, remember that whole controversy over the inauguration crowd size? Years before 2020.
Ah, right. That feels like ages ago now.
Exactly. Lemire's strength really comes from his position as a seasoned reporter. A lot of this is first-hand accounts, direct interactions he witnessed or reported on. That gives it a real sense of immediacy, a credibility.
So that immediacy, the observational quality, that's a strength. It's laser-focused on the Trump era. But does that tight focus maybe create a blind spot, a vulnerability?
I think it does, yeah. While that street cred, that first-hand reporting is high,
Yeah.
focusing so tightly on just those few years, it maybe risks overlooking the deeper historical roots. This kind of rhetoric didn't just spring out of nowhere.
Good point.
Lemire is excellent at documenting what happened right now, but perhaps less focused on why the conditions were already ripe for this kind of strategy to work so well.
That's a really critical distinction. Okay, let's shift gears and apply one of our structural tests. We often use this framework. Knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Where does Lemire's book fit?
Okay, so most of the claims about dishonesty, about the specific falsehoods, that falls squarely into knowledge. Knowledge is just, knowing what was said or done.
The facts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The verifiable reports, the public record, it's the documentation, the observable stuff. Lemire nails that.
Okay, so if knowledge is knowing what was claimed, where does understanding come in?
Understanding starts when you map the why and the impact. So the parts of the book analyzing the political consequences, how these specific lies fueled polarization, how they shifted institutional norms, that shows understanding. It's connecting the dots between the facts and the broader social dynamics.
Right, cause and effect. And then wisdom, the top tier. What would that look like?
Wisdom. That would be about offering some kind of, maybe not closure, but deeper insight, knowing how we might prevent this sort of thing from being so destructive next time.
So does the book get there?
Well, the book's judgments about the long-term, almost existential threat to American democracy, the corrosion of trust, they definitely aspire towards wisdom. But Lemire stops short, really, of offering a clear prescription, a fix. He doesn't claim to have the final answer on, how we mend the soul of democracy. It leaves the civic future kind of unresolved.
That lack of a definite fix actually leads us right into the logical analysis. The book is rigorous in cataloging all these documented falsehoods, right? It systematically shows the logical flaws in the rhetoric itself, and importantly, without just resorting to, personal attacks.
Agreed. That's a definite strength. He focuses on the substance of the claims, not just the personalities.
What?
But here's where it gets really interesting logically. And this is sort of the aha moment for us in the critique process. We have to ask, does the book maybe risk conflating correlation with causation?
Explain that. You mean assuming that because X happened alongside Y, X must have caused Y?
Precisely. I think many readers might naturally assume a direct cause and effect, that the former president single-handedly created all this toxic polarization just through his words.
Which is a powerful narrative.
It is. But the deeper, harder question is he solely driving the polarization, or is he actually a very powerful symptom? Maybe an accelerator of much deeper pre-existing divisions and dynamics that were already simmering in American society for decades.
Okay, so if he's more of an accelerator or a symptom rather than the sole root cause, that really changes how you think about fixing the problem, doesn't it?
It fundamentally changes it. You can't cure the underlying disease just by treating the most visible symptom.
Right.
If we accept that things like, say, economic anxiety, geographic self-sorting, the way the media landscape is fractured, if those things had already dug deep ideological trenches, then the big lie strategy wasn't necessarily the cause of the conflict, but maybe the most effective weapon available for a fight that was already underway.
That distinction is crucial for figuring out any long-term solution. It's not just about one person's actions then.
Exactly. It points to systemic issues.
You know, that kind of deeper analysis, connecting the specific events to those underlying conditions, that's why engaging with works like this is so valuable. And just a quick note for you listening, if you appreciate this kind of structured thinking approach to complex topics.
You might want to check out our YouTube channel, Mindful Moments.
Yeah, we offer AI-driven book analyses, summaries, critiques, and deep dives like this one. The goal is always to inspire reflection and, well, rational thought.
Okay, let's move into the ethical dimension now. Lemire's critique here is pretty sharp. He argues strongly that using these persistent falsehoods to deliberately fuel division, it just fundamentally fails a basic ethical standard. We often call it the golden rule test.
Right, the reciprocity idea. Treat others as you'd want to be treated. So if you wouldn't want those kinds of divisive tactics, those pervasive lies used against your own side, then they fail that ethical test. Pretty simple, really.
It is. And the book really documents how this systematic use of untruth undermines basic societal solidarity and fairness. It points out that this often hits the least advantaged hardest, those who rely most on stable, predictable institutions.
And it highlights the ethical choices, or maybe failures, of leaders who essentially went along with it.
Yes, the book documents what it calls Republican acquiescence quite extensively. It suggests this reveals, well, profound ethical asymmetries failures, really, in upholding core democratic norms when partisan gain was on the table.
That idea of prioritizing short-term political wins over long-term civic health seems central.
It's a critical theme. And to really gauge the civic damage described in the book, let's hold its findings up against maybe the highest civic benchmark we have in the U.S., the 6 goals stated right there in the preamble to the Constitution.
Okay, interesting test. Let's walk through them. First goal, form a more perfect union. How does the book's evidence stack up?
Well, the book pretty clearly demonstrates how the big lie narrative actively polarized national cohesion. It weakened unity. That's the exact opposite of forming a more perfect union. It fractured the shared sense of reality needed for self-governance.
Okay. Second goal, establish justice.
When you systematically undermine the perceived legitimacy of elections, establishing justice becomes incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for huge chunks of the population. Even when courts upheld results, the narrative documented in the book attacked that very foundation of electoral fairness.
Third, ensure domestic tranquility.
The evidence laid out, obviously culminating in January 6, but also including numerous other incidents. It shows how this rhetoric directly fueled civil unrest, escalated political discord. That's a direct negation of ensuring tranquility. It raises the specter of political violence.
Fourth, provide for the common defense. How does internal division relate to defense?
By deepening internal divisions, creating mistrust between citizens, the actions described actually increase our vulnerability. The book implies that severe internal fracture becomes a national security risk in itself. Common defense isn't just about external threats.
Makes sense. Fifth goal, promote the general welfare.
When partisan battles, fueled by these kinds of tactics, dominate the entire discourse, it pushes aside substantive policy debates, things like infrastructure, healthcare, the economy. The book suggests this focus harms the wider public good, prioritizing factional interests over the general welfare.
And the final goal, secure the blessings of liberty.
This one seems pretty direct. The core assault documented in the book is on the integrity of free and fair elections. That jeopardizes the most fundamental liberty in a democracy and certainly erodes future trust in the process itself. So yeah, the preamble works surprisingly well as a scorecard for the damage.
That's a really stark way to frame the impact. Okay, let's try to offer you, the listener, a balanced takeaway on Lemire's contribution here.
For sure, the strengths are clear, I think. The meticulous documentation of the statements, the events, the timelines surrounding the big lie strategy, that's absolutely essential reading for understanding this period.
And the ethical clarity is powerful.
Yes, it's very clear on the dangers of undermining democratic norms. Plus, the narrative is accessible, drawing on all that first-hand journalistic reporting we mentioned. It reads well.
But, okay, where does the book fall short? What are its limitations?
Well, as we touched on earlier, probably the main one is the limited historical perspective. If you compare it to, say, deeper historical or philosophical works on how democracies decay, its tight focus on the Trump years means it's less about diagnosing the long-term systemic rot.
It describes the current fire really well, but maybe not enough about the building structural flaws over decades.
That's a good analogy, yeah. It's more focused on the arson than the fire code, maybe.
And I also felt that, while his arguments are sound, many of the ethical and political points echo what became a broader media consensus. They're true, but maybe don't offer radically new philosophical insights, especially for someone already following this closely.
And that connects to the final potential weakness,
Mm-hmm.
the lack of concrete proposed remedies. The book is brilliant as a diagnostic tool. It lays out the problem with force and clarity, but it's less prescriptive.
So it tells you what's wrong, but not necessarily how to fix it.
Pretty much. It definitely highlights the urgency, the need for accountability and institutional resilience, but it doesn't really lay out a comprehensive roadmap for how we get there, how we restore what's been lost.
Okay, so if the book's forecast is essentially more democratic instability, maybe increased political violence, continued erosion of civic trust, if that's the trajectory, what are the big unanswered questions this critique leaves us grappling with?
That's the crucial part. The critique really forces us to ask some tough ones, like, can democratic trust actually be restored given the intense hyperpolarization and, frankly, partisan dysfunction we see now?
And in this information environment, can truth ever really compete with a lie designed for maximum viral spread? Does it even stand a chance?
That's a huge question, and maybe the most fundamental. Has the American political system developed any real immunity to this kind of mass-scale, systemic lying and raw political opportunism? Or is this destructive approach now just baked into how campaigns are run and how governing happens?
Those are sobering thoughts, really essential long-term challenges.
Definitely. And before we wrap up, for anyone wanting to explore further, we really do recommend looking for resources that offer more historical or philosophical context on truth, rhetoric, and democracy itself. There's a lot more depth to plumb there.
And just to reiterate for you listening, to provide this evaluation, we applied a systematic and, we hope, precise critique framework. We consciously tried to balance the conceptual, the ethical, the epistemic, the knowledge versus understanding part, and the civic criteria in looking at the big lie.
If you found this valuable, click the link on screen for the full in-depth book analysis. And please consider subscribing, sharing, or even purchasing the book via the link. Most importantly, keep thinking rationally.
And check out our many other genre-based book deep dives over at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.